Here is the story box. I wonder what story we're going to have today out of this wonderful story box, full of precious treasure, full of precious stories. It's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in a faraway land, lived a man called Daniel. Daniel was a really good worker. He was kind and honest and true. And he lived in a city that was a long way from his home. It was a big city with a king and lots of people living there. Daniel was a man who prayed. He prayed 3 times a day. He prayed to his living God, even though he lived in a foreign land. The king really liked Daniel. And the king and Daniel became good friends. I wonder what kind of friends you have. I wonder if you have any friends like Daniel, who are good and honest and true. The king was so pleased with Daniel and his work that he put him in charge of lots and lots and lots of people. With Daniel's help, much of the work would be done, and he was kind to the people who worked under him. He had a lot of responsibility. I wonder how you feel when someone gives you a responsible job. I wonder if sometimes you feel a little bit uneasy. I wonder if you can always be kind to those who are called to work with you. Trouble wasn't only Daniel that worked for the king. He had some other leaders, and they were very jealous of Daniel. I wonder if you ever get jealous. I wonder what kind of things you get jealous of. I wonder what you would do with that jealousy. Can you let it go? Trouble was, these other leaders couldn't let their jealousy go. And so, while Daniel was working with his people, the leaders came right alongside the king. And they were tricking him. They said to the king, "Wouldn't it be a good idea if everybody worshipped you, O king?" The king was very flattered, and he foolishly signed the law that said The only person that can be worshipped is the king himself. I wonder what Daniel was going to do about that. Well, the very next day, Daniel was seen at his window praying. He was praying to the living God. I wonder if when people tell you not to pray, that you still pray. I wonder if people make fun of you, you would still talk to God. Daniel did just that. And when the leaders saw him, they went straight to his home and arrested him and took him to the king. This man has been found guilty of praying to someone else, of worshipping someone other than you, mighty king. He'll need to be put to death. We'll put him in the lion's den. The king was really upset. He was really angry. He was angry mostly with himself. I wonder if you ever get angry with yourself. The king decided the only thing he could do was to pray to Daniel's God. He didn't really know how to pray very well, and he didn't really know the living God that Daniel knew. But he would talk to him. I wonder if sometimes you don't know how to pray. I wonder if sometimes you don't really know who God is. The leaders, the jealous leaders, took Daniel down to the lion's den. And the lions were there with their mouths wide open. They threw Daniel into the pit and then scurried away. I wonder what Daniel did next. Well, I think you've probably guessed. Daniel prayed to the living God. And I don't know how, and I wonder how, but suddenly the lions just shut their mouths. And they kept their mouths closed all night. I wonder how God did that. The next morning, the king ran down to the pit, to the lion's den, and when he looked inside, Daniel was still alive, and he pulled out his friend Daniel, and they celebrated together. The king was amazed. He was amazed that the living God had kept Daniel safe. He was amazed that the living God had heard his prayers. I I wonder if God hears your prayers. The king was so delighted that Daniel was still with him, that he made a new law, a law that told the people that they could worship the living God that was Daniel's God, that they too could come to know him. I wonder if you know God. I wonder if the living God knows you. And that's the end of today's story.